Hello and welcome to Creative Outcomes. My name is Tracybrooker, and I have my wonderful associate today with me, Judith Hurst. And today we are going to talk about children tapping into their divine power. And just to kind of, this is a podcast about homeschooling, unschooling, soul self-directed learning. Because as we evolve, so does consciousness. And we like to tie that into all of our conversations. So today, Judith had sent me this little email. I would like to talk about tapping into a child, tapping into their divine power. Now, Judith had started a school. So I have a lot of questions about that. And my mind was rumbling because Judith and I, every time we have this conversation, she goes, "Well, I don't watch the news." So I don't know if those of you who watched the Oscars yesterday in my kind of mindless, I have to find something mindless to do, self-care. So it's like, oh, I'm going to watch the Oscars. And there was a traumatic experience that happened on camera. And so I thought, power, interesting, this idea of power. So I'm going to share with Judith first what happened because she doesn't know. And I thought, wow, what a tie-in, even if this idea of Ukraine, so we have ego versus being conscious. So yesterday, let me just tell you, set up the scene. Mm-hmm. So Chris Rock is a famous comedian.
Yes.
And okay, so, and he could be rather, uncomfortable sometimes, it's like, yeah. Ooh, right? Sometimes it's like, yes. Ooh, yeah, right. Okay, yeah. And people know that. So he came out and started his jokes. And then Will Smith and his wife, Jada, were in the front because he is up for the actor. Guys, forgive me. I'm not an actress, I think, for actor of the year, whatever. So Chris Brown went. So Jada Pinkett Smith has alopecia, and that's where you lose your hair. And so she is bald. A lot of people didn't know that. I don't know if Chris Rock knew that or not. So his joke was, I can't remember word for word. His joke was about G.I. Jane. Oh, are you going to be in G.I. Jane 2? And Will Smith laughed. And then he turned and he saw that Jada was offended. But she, you could see she kind of was offended, regained whatever. The next thing you know, Will Smith walks on the stage and smacked in front of live TV Chris Rock. Right. So Judith's face, you guys can't see this. Judith's face is like, what? But drama. So, and then wait, let me sum it up. So that happens.
Mirrors. Yeah.
Yes. That happens. And of course, Will Smith goes back, yells, keep her effing name out of your mouth, right? Mm-hmm. So then later, Will Smith wins, right? Chris Rock, let me tell you, composes himself, finishes his scene of what he's up there to talk about, leaves. The next thing you know, Will Smith is up for his award and he wins. And I'm only telling you guys from the camera. I'm an observer, right? Watching this. He's crying. He apologizes to the Oscar Academy. He apologizes to his nominees. And he talks about, I am here as a vessel for love. And of course, you're sitting there going, that's not how I know love. So that's just that's about power. Okay. And I love that Judith's like, we're going to talk about divine power. So I thought it would be such a great intro so that even I was thinking parenting, and here I'm parenting a new puppy. We have power, ego power, and then we have conscious tapping into conscious divine power, the power within you. Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, I always would like to say, to me, that has to be, and please disagree with me. Number one, you have to be conscious and aware. Number two, tapping into the divine will. Okay. Ironically, Will Smith. I don't know why that just came out. Okay. So we have this divine will first, right? So allowing the divine will of God, of the universe, flow through us, right? And then we're able to tap into this divine power, personal power. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That was just really bizarre. Divine will. So that's what Will was missing, is allowing the divine, because I think we all know, everyone's said, dude, if you were really a vessel for love for God, you wouldn't have, you could have done something like my wife and I leave, right? That could have been a statement, a powerful statement. But yeah. So anyways.
Beautiful example of how human we are. Will Smith, I've heard him in many interviews, and he really is a very beautiful, evolved soul. His parenting is well documented in the
he's
media.
unschooled. He has unschooled his kids.
And
yes,
he is, in my opinion, someone whose thoughts and ideas are really valuable. So putting it in context is so helpful, because we're not looking at some complete stranger who just runs onto a stage and shouts obscenities and slaps somebody.
Right.
We're talking about a persona whom we've come to know and love. Will Smith, the character, of course, because we're all characters, is really lovable.
Yes. Inspirational.
He's inspirational. He's gifted because he allows that gift to flow through him, through his performance, etc. So for us to see that, air quote, beautiful soul Will Smith do something as heinous as slapping a woman, which couldn't be more of a hot topic, right?
Well, it was a man. It was Chris Rock. So it was a man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They're talking about Jada. There we go.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was the joke about Jada. And
okay.
I mean, we just saw his ego and this idea of power. And his explanation was, I will always protect my family. And even that, if I think of, that's no different than what's happening in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are protecting their family, their democracy, those who are staying to fight. They are protecting something, right? And I even think of Putin, he's protecting this idealism of the, because his banter is he's fighting off neo-Nazism. And so the ego is contriving, this is what I'm protecting, the ego for Putin. Ukraine ego is, this is what we're protecting, right? And we have violence, we have major violence, death, etc. And then Will Smith is, this is what I'm protecting. And so, and all in power. And you know what I thought of too, is here's these two gentlemen are no different than two children. There's a child, he yells a name, right? You know how children,
you poopy head.
Yes. And the other one, instead of yelling back, hits the other child, right? So it's the same thing, because I want to bring it back full circle to parenting, raising two boys. And so how in that moment, because especially coming into this democratic free schooling, Judith set us up in being conscious, aware, and how that can all come full circle into tapping into our divine power to say, oh, wait a second. I could respond differently.
Right. Well, first of all, please let me start everything with the disclaimer that I don't know anything.
But I love it. I love it. To me, you know everything. And
no.
I mean, because you would always say to me, but you do. See, we all.
Yes, I was just going to say, the truth is we all know everything.
Yes.
Me, Judith Hurst, knows nothing.
Same here. That's why we have the podcast.
Exactly.
Bringing about information.
Exactly. I will explore the topic with you for fun, because it's fun, and I like exploring it.
Yes.
But the disclaimer for anyone listening is I am not.
Yes, we are not professionals. We are not
No.
professionals. This is a podcast and we are having a conversation. So yes.
Yeah. And we're just souls on a journey like everybody else. We're finding our way. We're learning, we're growing, we're making mistakes. And then we think we know a little bit more about something and we go, oh, I just discovered this.
Yeah.
And everyone says, yes, that's called sliced bread, Judith. We learned that, you know.
Well, for those of you, I'll just share, I showed Judith the new puppy and I could sit here and be giggly as before we go into this conversation of conscious power, divine power. And I struggle, right? I told Judith, well, I have this idea. What if I unschool the dog, the puppy, and let's see how that works. So I let the puppy free. And of course, she runs outside, which she knows based upon her previous experiences. I'm going to eat all of the grass clippings and I won't stop. She will just go and go and go. So, yeah. So
yes, there is this ineffable, mystical, unknowable sweet spot where, and I've seen it in education settings over and over and over, where various facilitators are trying to find the sweet spot and they swing too far one way and it's mayhem. And the children are allowed to do literally.
I'm laughing because it's just hilarious. Yes, that is such a word.
And sometimes that mayhem can cause severe damage. Especially I've seen young children in free learning environments and they're watching porn on their phones.
Oh my goodness.
And that for me personally, for other people they might say, well, yeah. But for me personally,
right,
the emotional potential for trauma,
yes,
is something that they just can't understand yet.
Agree.
Is it behooves the adults to be the bumper cars, you know? So when you go to the fun fair and the bumper cars are driving around, there has to be big bumper pads around the edge so that you can have fun bumping into everybody and not drive off the edge off a cliff. And so the same when our children are just learning to walk, we kind of make a point that if we see they're about to trip over and hit their head on the edge of a coffee table, we very quietly and gently reach our hand out and create a little buffer there just in case they fall. We don't scream at them, don't go that way. You know, we just lovingly create little borders for them. And so the same with education, in my opinion, we allow them complete and utter freedom within the bumpered arena. So there are some guidelines that the adults in charge need to lovingly provide. So we lovingly guide our puppy away from poisonous, and not that your situation is poisonous, but some plants are poisonous to dogs. And if people know which ones they are, which I don't, it would be very wise not to allow a dog to have that experience.
That is correct.
So many might argue, well, that might have been in the soul plan of that animal, so blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well.
But it's all, everything is absolutely as it needs to be. Everything, because consciousness is just a bubbling up of what isness. Yeah. So right now, this interview is just what isness. It's not good or bad or wrong.
It just is.
It just is. And if it promotes some love, then I don't know how to say that is potentially optimum, because then one falls into the trap of saying, are you saying that's better? You know, now you've created
which is duality. That's the duality, the yes, no,
right.
the love, the fear, the left, the right. And it's again, if we're talking just the present moment, in this moment, my dog's eating a rock. And so I have to make the conscious decision of saying, no, and, we're going to, right. So we will choose to, you will eat here at this time and you will eat dog food,
Right.
puppy food, whatever. So, okay. So going back to, let's go back to the children. Okay.
Mhm.
So, because I, to be honest with you, it is no different than what's happening in any argument in the world.
Of course.
Children are arguing.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's, and I'm curious in this idea, I'm going to share what I did in parenting, of finding a child, their tapping into, I don't want to say finding because it's not lost, tapping into becoming aware of divine power versus egoic power. What does that look like? I will share from my perspective. And again, I'm not sure if it was right, wrong. It just is, and it just is. I have had open conversations with my children. And more than most times, I think what I'm finding is that, as my son, who is now 20, said, I'm so glad that you have a conversation with me about things versus telling me what to do and what not to do. Because at 22, especially 20, you don't want your parent, and so I would bring up situations as children, as two boys fighting. This is mine. This is, okay, let's sit down and have a conversation. What does that feel like when one has and one has not? The haves and the haves not. Can we come to a compromise where, because otherwise you both kind of feel yucky. Is there any way to not feel, like these are parenting words for the 8 and the 10-year-old who are fighting over video time. And one gets mad and throws something at the other because that's exactly what happened on the stage yesterday, right? One says something, the other gets angry. I'm going to throw, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to, one's crying, one's not. So how do we address this? And even this idea of timeouts felt weird when I tried those, to sit and say, well, timeout. But when I sat with the child at the time, that's what felt good. I sat with them, sat next to them, because in essence, there always was one that felt bad, one that felt wrong. And so let's just sit down and talk about this. Like, yeah, you're really sad. I'm sorry you're sad. Yeah, that must feel awful. How do you think we could do this better? And I go back to, oh my gosh, so I will share. Okay, so we're going to go back to divine power. That's the divine power. To me, giving them, I'm going to hand the possible solution. Can you come up with a solution versus me telling them how to behave, right? So what do you think? How do you think you could have handled that better? And I say this, that's giving the power to the child, correct? So they come up with a solution. We go back, they work it out. Sorry. And okay, can we come to a conclusion? Great. Reminds me, so my son, who does the audio editing for this, he said, hey, I was listening to the podcast and I thought it was really good. It was with Jerry Mintz, Jerry is the co-founder of Arrow. And he really liked that Jerry sat down when they were opening the Brooklyn school for the first time. There was about 5 or 6, I think Jerry said, they were all coming into this apartment. They were all going to meet and discuss how should we start this school. And somebody had the idea, and it was probably Jerry, from what I remember the conversation, why don't we ask the children who will be coming into the school? Mm-hmm. They invited a couple of the children to the meeting. They said, how would you like the school to look?
And they were kids. They were
kids, 6 years old. 6 years old. The child responded. Yeah. The child responded, well, we probably shouldn't have new furniture because children can ruin new furniture. Yeah. Great idea. And so
only a child could think of that.
Yes. And so the child has that tapped into divine power.
Mm-hmm.
There was no authoritarian, this is how we think it should be set up. Mm-hmm. Okay, great idea. Mm-hmm. And I think there's the divine power. And then this idea of, homeschooling my 2 kids, we're fighting. It's my turn to play, whatever it is. And what should we do? I don't know. Can you come up with a solution? Because in essence, basically, every time when I tried to control the situation, it didn't work.
Mm.
And somebody ended up feeling bad. I don't know. It just is different. It's giving them that power and the trust that.
Well, there's the word. Trust is the key word, in my opinion. Life, this 3D experience that we are very privileged to be experiencing, involves such trust and learning to trust. And so to raise children in a way that they never get to experience trusting themselves or their own decisions, like the children in certain parts of the world where they get to play with machetes and they let their family trust them enough to understand, well, if they cut themselves, etc., etc. So trust is such a huge part of learning. And when I started Yellowwood, my non-school school, people were aghast when I told them that the young learners didn't have to do anything if they didn't want to. And people said, well, what'll happen at your first lunchtime? What if they all just go home? What if they all just leave? And I just knew I had a deep trust in the children because they were honored and respected. They said, it's okay. They'll be back. Watch. And they all went off for lunch and they all came back. Because for the first time, there were adults saying, we trust you, we respect you. You don't have to have handcuffs and rules to tell you when to go somewhere. And if you're a bit late, that's what happens in life sometimes. We'll talk about it. But that freedom, the ability to experience freedom in a safe arena, in the home, in a school setting, air quotes around school, is so important to allow that divine power in a child to evolve. So I would be absolutely thrilled and honored to mention an incredible educator called Naomi Aldort. Naomi, and then Aldort is spelled A-L-D as in dog, O-R-T. And her website, I think her most, not famous book, but her main book is called Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. And her website is naomialdort.com. And the resources on this website are just astonishing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She guides families in unschooling, and she does homeschooling advice. She unschooled her children and just their natural music ability flourished, which of course it would in a situation of freedom and choice and love and encouragement. So I believe she has a couple of musical prodigy children. So her story is really interesting, and she's such a beautiful mentor and guide for anyone needing support in homeschooling or unschooling. So I'd love for people to visit her website. So many resources. She has web classes, videos, workshops, family retreats, books, parenting resources, everything. And with many of these things, I'm sure a lot of her resources are free and a lot of them are probably paid. I don't know. I've got nothing to do with Naomi other than I've been to one of her workshops through Aero, and she's just a remarkable, beautiful, beautiful soul. So if anyone's listening to this and they think, well, it's all very well listening to a podcast, but I want to go to a website and see videos in action. I want to hear more of this particular topic that I heard about, then this website really is for you. So I just wanted to get that in.
Well, thank you for that, because I probably have met her because we were talking about that was the one I spoke to at Aero. Mm-hmm. So you and I discussed, we were talking about divine will preceding mm-hmm. divine power. Mm-hmm. And this idea of somebody who's conscious, or we have a child who has we'll say, for a better choice of words, remember everything's relative, less egoic experience is ego brain, the way we respond to the world. A child is more free of all of that. Excuse me. And so, I'm just trying to, the brain's trying to rationalize this. And the brain is saying, okay, divine will. So I can sit here as an adult who's trying to eliminate some of my programming. I can sit here and breathe and relax and become aware of my thoughts and my programs so I can become more present. And the more present I become, if something happens, such as the doorbell ringing, dogs are barking, excuse me, how do I respond? Because I can respond and yell, dog, shut up, or whatever those are. Or I could go, wait 1 second, we're going to pause, and then I'm going to come back, and I wait and I let them do their thing. And then we return, and all dogs are sleeping right now. So, so when a child, right? So to me, that's part of the divine. So I have divine will, I calm, I'm present, I'm aware of the situation. And then how do I respond? I know I can respond one of two ways. And so that is the power.
There's only love and fear.
Okay, perfect. Love or fear. And so here I am, and I responded, right? I chose to respond. Watch the dog, see what happens, go to the door. Why is she, so there's this kind of presence awareness, even without judgment. There was just an isness as we started off the podcast. And so, which I think is the divine power. So it's the divine power for me is in collaboration with divine will, saying, okay, I have a choice. There's the divine will. And I have a choice. At least that's how I'm feeling. That's the divine will. And so the power is how I respond. And then that's where it could go one way or the other.
Yes. Because our divine will allows for us free choice.
Yes. Yes, that is the will, right?
Is the blessing and the curse that we've been given. If one wants to use the parlance of God, then it's such a handy syllable because it's one syllable, and it doesn't. It used to turn me off because it has such 3D connotations of religion. Yes. And of course, you and I know that I don't speak with religion; I speak with the oneness, right? But instead of it's much easier to use one syllable and say God rather than, the ineffable essence that is eternal. One syllable, done. So, yes, it's easier to imagine, I've forgotten what I was saying, that the God knowingness in all of us, when we, the little vehicle, are really silent, then the true God essence can arise through us and make beautiful decisions. Let's go this way. No, let's go that way. And in that silence and connection to the one, the source, God, whatever anyone wants to call it. Of course, there is no word for it. It's just humans' ideas that we created words. But that truth, that resonance will feel a certain way. It's nothing to do with the intellect or anything at all. It's a resonance that says this is right. It is good. It is peaceful.
Yes.
And you get a feeling in your guts when it isn't that. There's a feeling that goes, oh, that was not. So here's a confession. I'll make it on this podcast, and I don't mind. I sold my house a while ago, and hanging up on the outdoor porch was a little bird feeder that my daughter had actually given to me for a Christmas present. And the house was empty for months and months and months. The woman who sold it told me that she wasn't able to move in for 6 months. So every time I would drive past my old house, which was empty, I would see the bird feeder hanging up outside. And it was a $10 bird feeder, okay? But it was sentimental to me because my daughter gave it to me for Christmas. So here I go, confession. I took it off the porch one day and took it to my new home, where I actually have birds come and I see the birds enjoying the seed, et cetera, et cetera. So initially I felt just so awful that I had done that because it's stealing. Wasn't my...
See, I have to tell you, I didn't see it that way.
Oh, okay. Well, to me, my heart did.
Yeah.
Because in my heart, that home was sold. The woman owned it. She was moving in soon. She was happy to have it. She wasn't in it yet. And it technically was hers. Now, just because my ego saw that bird feeder all the time and went, but really, I quite like to have that in my house. Technically, I did buy it. And no, it was a present for my daughter, And so I actually wrote to her and said, I am so sorry. I have to confess, I took that bird feeder off your porch. And of course I felt wonderful afterwards. And I don't know why I've segued into that, but it's about the heart knowing what is right.
Yes.
Even in a tiny instance like this, where many people would say, Judith, whatever, it's just a bird feeder. And you told her, and so get over it. But my heart knew, you know what, that just wasn't right. You can't.
For you.
Yeah. And then take it back and then not tell anyone. So for me, the heart is the boss of everything.
Yeah.
And you can't get away from it. You can try to tuck things away and say, you know what, I'm not going to look at that. But our consciousness tucks everything away. And I have done enough soul work to have brought up memories from so long ago. And they're still vibrating until I see them and release them with love and self-forgiveness. Because these things don't disappear by themselves. And
that's the power. And even connecting to your heart, that's the divine power. Mm-hmm. I've had, I've taken many spiritual classes, and one woman always, tells the kids, put your hands on your heart. What does your heart say? But I would almost like to transition to what brings you the most peace.
Yeah.
What brings you the most peace?
Yeah.
Yeah. At least for me, the older I get, brings me the most peace. Without control, without manipulation, without just peace. Like, I don't know, because like right and wrong, but just what brings me peace. And even this, having the puppy in the silly, to me, which I would think is so silly for a 54-year-old to be sitting on the ground, yes, she's biting me, whatever, but I find peace in that. Like, just to sit with her brings me peace. It kind of brings this sense of childhood, playing with the puppy, when I'm sure I could be doing everything else. And now I'm going to sit with her.
Yeah, and that's the soul saying, take a seat.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, so it's just, so lately I find myself, what creates the most peace? Because again, but two, without the control and manipulation, right?
She has a lot to tell you. We have so much to learn from our animals and from nature, from our trees and our flowers. We're so programmed to laugh at such an idea and say, don't be ridiculous. What am I going to learn from my puppy? What am I going to learn from a tree? But all the wisdom
comes from nature. Yes.
We've just trained ourselves not to hear it anymore.
Yeah, and I will share. So, divine power as a parent. Oh my goodness. I might have to look up this book. It's by McGonigal. So she wrote a book, and she has her PhD in the emotional aspects of video gaming. Like that's what she does. And she started out with video, it's kind of like how everyone, it's like the big secret's out. Oh my goodness, all these apps are addicting, blah, blah. That was what she has done for a living. She wrote the science about, this is even before apps, correct? Mm-hmm. And so her book, what was lovely about her book is that, and she talks about how we can, it's kind of like AI. We have AI and everybody said it could be for good or for evil, right? But there's an awareness with that. Like we just have to, there has to be a conscious awareness of, well, how can we use this for good? And so like the ending of her book kind of ties in, well, we can create video games about the environment and how there's quests and how do we do that, right? So understanding that, okay, so here's we are in the video gaming, it affects the brain, the frontal, I mean, she ties in all the science how it affects us. And so how can we use it for good? And I think, so video game unschooling power that many parents have this. Well, how could you, because radical unschoolers say, let my kids play video games forever. Mm-hmm. Physicians, science says no more than 2 hours on screen because it starts to affect the brain. And so, and I think you and I've talked about this. So what I did was to give it back to my kids. At first, I was like, well, what am I comfortable with? Right? Because I thought, well, I can be honest with them and say, listen, I'm just your mom. And this is how I really talk to my kids. I'm your mom. I've never been a parent before. I don't have the right answers. So this is what I'm comfortable with. Like I'm telling the truth. I'm not comfortable with that. But then when I figured out the whole kinesiology, right? And we had this discussion before, giving them the power to say, what does your body say? Divine power. If their body holds all the answers, and then the irony, it was less than 2 hours. And they would giggle. They would be like, after they would, we'd push on their arm, we did the kinesiology. They would giggle and say, well, that can't be true. And then they do it again. And it's like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I was talking to a friend of mine. He literally turned to his daughter and said, how long do you think you should play video games? She said, really, for about an hour. Didn't even have to do that, right? Didn't even listen to the body. Just told the truth.
I would love to reiterate what you just brought up in case people hadn't heard it in the previous podcast or if they're not familiar with it. And that's some basic muscle testing abilities. All parents, I believe, should be armed with that information because it's such a simple, non-invasive, fun thing to teach our children from any age. And Tracy can talk about it later, or I can point them to any sort of website where you can just Google muscle testing. And it's a simple thing where the child puts their arm out straight and you push down on it. And I encourage everyone to look it up because instead of giving a child a rule, saying, no, this is what must happen, Tracy's comment about, well, no, let's muscle test it, really empowers them and it opens their mind to go, wait, this muscle testing thing is actually really cool. And then who knows where they'll take that in their own
Absolutely. So well, not only that
you've mentioned that.
It brings them to self-trust.
Yes.
Which is divine power.
All the answers.
Yes.
We, again, we are not little people. And that's the hardest thing for so many people to understand is that we are one energy, one amazing, magical energy that takes the form of a puppy, a husband, a wife, a student, a school, a pit bull.
Well, right. So, and it's constantly, you just said it perfectly, because the picture in my mind is what happened last night with Will Smith and Chris Rock is a reflection of what is happening in the world in Ukraine. They're just on a bigger global picture. These are two individuals. So they, in essence, are a reflection of...
I just wrote this morning. This is so perfect because we have to have a mirror to see ourselves, either from the literal, like, let me hold a mirror so I can check my hair or something, or in the world, I can't see myself, my true self, until I see others. And if somebody else is shouting at me, then I get the opportunity to realize, oh, okay, I, Judith, have done something that is triggering that shouting. So what is it in me that is creating that experience? But we're not, in society, we're not raised to approach things that way. It was Narcissus that originally developed the myth about Narcissus looking at his reflection in the water and thinking, wow, you are gorgeous. And Narcissus couldn't take his eyes off himself. And he just, perished in love with
the
his
emperor's new clothes. I always think of the emperor's new clothes, right?
Right.
Emperor's walking out, and yes.
Right. So
can't even see it himself. Yes.
Yes. So Narcissus is such a beautiful analogy because everyone is our mirror, everybody. And when we can see that, when we look at Ukraine, we can say, that's me. That war is me.
It's happening with me. Yeah.
I am that. And it's not separate from me. It's not a war over there between two groups. It is my soul reflecting the pain and the trauma and the contentiousness and the dissatisfaction and all of that shadow ego stuff has just boiled up, and it's being expressed as a, quote, war. So we can act it out.
Well, but then you say to yourself, and I think this is, again, going back to divine power. So in this idea of divine power, we can go back within and say, okay, this is affecting me. And so for me, knowing I'm in my power, I can say, okay, I have a choice here. I cannot go to Ukraine. Now, if I want to donate to help the humanitarian crisis, that's good. So I know that I have choices. If I want to do nothing, that's good. And then I said, every time I had a thought about Ukraine, the children, whatever was happening over there, I told myself, I'm going to say a prayer, give a blessing. I'm even going to pray for Putin and to soften his heart so that some more light could come through, because in essence, more light is coming into that. And so if that's what I can do in my divine power, which is, to me, think about it, had this war not happened, I've just spent more thought time that I could be thinking of a million other things. Instead, I say, I have that thought. I'm going to say a prayer.
And that's
how beautiful is that?
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we can't affect a change anywhere but in ourself.
Yeah.
That's the only place it happens. Yeah. We can't hold someone's body and move them into a position and make them do something. We don't have that ability. The only thing, and the things you mentioned, of course, yes, we can donate to a cause if it's a cause that's truly capable of sending food somewhere or something, which is great. Yes. I don't say to people, don't do anything because it's all just a play of consciousness. No, of course not. The war is, air quote, real, especially to the people who are fighting or losing.
Experiencing. That's correct.
Yeah. So I would never, ever say it's just an illusion. Get over it. But it's an illusion for our learning. Yeah. And when we can see it as an illusion for our learning, we start to realize, oh, all that aggression, that's me. If I want the war to end, then I need to be peaceful and loving and forgiving to everyone. not just to which side I want, but to everyone, as you said, to Putin, to everybody.
Right.
It can't just be for one. And it can't be, the quality of mercy is not strained. Shakespeare's such my dude. I just love him. And he was just such a seer. He was such a mystic. He really was. And of course, he said, there's no such thing as good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah.
So all our judgments of, that bad group over there, or even back to homeschooling. Oh, people who homeschool, they don't do it right. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. There's more judgment. There's no such thing as good or bad unless we think it. Unless we say, oh, that family, they're really bad at homeschooling. And then you roll your eyes and all that judgment. No, if somebody's homeschooling the way they want to homeschool, great. And if they're learning some difficult lessons because their children are making poor choices, that's learning. Yeah. That's how the soul grows.
I had a gentleman talk with me in regards to, we were just talking about marketing because they provide like security for your internet. So they're kind of looking to homeschoolers, right? And so his comment was, well, all homeschoolers are Christian homeschoolers. And I said, I don't think that's true. I said, in fact, most of what I consider homeschoolers I would think are underground. They're not registered. They're just at home schooling, however that looks.
Yeah.
And I said, your data reflects people who have purchased or our, curriculum. And I said, but I don't think that's, it was just my point of view.
No, I think I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have met so many underground people that I'm like, and that seems to be the way things are going now, which is great. It's terrific. But anyways, yeah. So in this idea of, I was saying that only because it comes back to the perception, right? Do we only see, we have our blinders on one way. I do want to go back though to, because I think one of the things this year that I realized, and I would say this year, is that I find in my own spiritual journey is to be careful because we do like to identify with things, correct? And I know with both you and I and our personal experiences, Judith was near death, mine were visions, and the physicality of those experiences. I think to being careful of putting labels on like what we see, and it's kind of like, how can I give me an okay, here's an example. You were talking about the mirror. So I have some people in my life who they kind of whip that around and say, I'm a mirror, or you're just, I'm just a mirror for you. I'm just a mirror for you. Right. And so there's kind of like this, it's kind of using these kind of spiritual tactics too, that in essence can make somebody feel wrong, and this year, what I'm learning about that is that we have to be careful in our belief systems. It's kind of like, I have another friend, right? So they're learning, I have the Louise Hay, right? I have pain in my body, and that means this. Well, and I have to appreciate Matt Kahn in this, because he's kind of out there. I love it because he's debunking all of these. And he goes, well, what if it's just your body and it has a pain and you just sit and allow the pain? Don't even analyze it. Don't say it's about anything. Can you just go in with the pain and just allow it to be? And it was funny because I will share, I have been ill for the last few weeks. And ironically, the tail end of the illness was my lower back. And the other day I just sat there and I just said, I haven't done that. I'm fighting the pain. I was fighting the pain that I finally just said, I'm just going to let it happen. And the fighting the pain was bringing the pain inside my head, that the emotional effect. So it was like,
well, when we push against anything,
so we're pushing it. And then I wanted to reason it. What is this about? And
just allow it. Allow everything.
And that's what I just want people to be clear, that just to be careful of our spiritual beliefs, right? But in the essence, I kind of stopped myself and I went, I'm just going to let the pain, I'm just going to allow it. Just going to let it be. You're there.
Yeah,
you're there. I get you. I don't know what it's about. And truthfully, I'm tired and I don't want to think about it. And so I'm just going to let my body. And it has gone away.
Yeah.
I would say officially by yesterday. And so
our body knows exactly what it needs to heal. And if we just get out of its way and give it the bare essentials, much like homeschooling, the bare essentials, love, and those bumper, borders.
Yeah, I love the bumpers.
Love and the bumper borders applies to everything.
Well, I think it goes back
to healing.
Yes, I think it goes back to, what do you say? Safety. It doesn't change on a personal level.
No,
Safety. We need food and water, right? We have these, what are those? What's the hierarchy? These are the basic, right? The basic, which are the most important things. This is what we need.
Yes. If you don't have food, you got nothing.
Right.
Yeah. And so we just complicate everything with the mind. The mind just loves to make things difficult. Well, loves to make things is such anthropomorphism, isn't it? But it's just a computer. The mind is just a computer.
Yes. And don't fight it.
Feel love.
And it is beautiful. Because, I feel always grateful to the ego, allowing the ego. The ego has saved me many times, right?
Yeah, that's what it does.
And so self-preservation. And so don't fight the ego, just again, allow it to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. But then the awareness and the awareness in the presence. Because once you're present, then the rest just is.
Yes.
And when we go back to children and raising puppies and raising kids and just being with them. Okay, so here's an interesting, I did want to bring this up because it came in this divine power. So I have the news on, they talk about Ukraine quickly. And it's one thing I heard is, they're so excited because in order to bring normalcy, hope I said that right, they're going to offer free online schooling to those students from Ukraine so they can access school whenever they're. And I thought, well, that's good for the students who may want the school. But in this moment, there are students who might still be working on the trauma of what has just occurred. Yeah. So the ego, the programs we've been told is, well, school is normal. I have many parents. I've been in the medical field for years. My child is dying of cancer, but if we get school in there, that'll keep things normal. Is it? My kid had tumors, and I'm going to be honest with you. I just wanted to sit with him and love him because I didn't know what was going to happen. Could care less about school. Yeah. I just wanted to be with him.
Absolutely. And that's where we end up all over and over and over with love. Yeah. Love wins the day over and over and over. If it feels right in our heart to say, my daughter, I'd let her stay home from school all the time because we could go to the fair or something. Yes. And I didn't understand that you can't actually do that in America too many times before you get a notice.
I love it.
And I went, oh, that's scary. So learning by doing.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I agree with you. It's all about honoring the child, and if they are feeling scared or low, or
that's what they need.
To force a child to do anything that they're not. This is the slippery slope, though, isn't it? To force a child to do something. Ideally, it's such an exciting, engaging, love-filled environment that learning just happens so naturally and passionately. That's the ideal learning environment. And that learning environment can look like a military school. Yeah, sure. Some of the teachers in extreme schools that have lots of rules can have such beautiful hearts and creativity. It's not about the ideal that I'm talking of looks like tie-dye floaty skirts and just free play and finger painting all over the furniture. No, not at all.
And when I first unschooled, I met this wonderful mom. She just was, and I've said this before, she said, unschooling could be school if that's what the child wants, requires. If they say, and she said she had a son who was completely unschooled, video games all day, and her daughter who did school, and the daughter would get angry and upset because she was allowing the son. And she goes, but that's unschooling. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And, and so we have to be aware of just that.
Yeah, and Sudbury Valley has extensive documentation about the studies they've done with their children who had no schooling whatsoever. And there were a group of children there that all they did was play video games.
Yeah.
That's all they did. And anyone can go to sudburyvalley.org, I think that's the website, and read the anecdotal information about these boys that all they did was play video games for a solid year, and they really enjoyed it and had a great time, and now they're all in college doing something. Because
I encourage people to watch the videos, because they have a video, and I love this. I don't know if it's still up, and the one boy is
school.
Yeah, so it's one of the students, and he says, oh yeah, everybody's playing video games. And then about 16, I noticed my friends all started to want to take classes. So I said to myself, all right, I guess I will too. So basically, no different than a puppy watching the adult dogs, right? He's watching his friends, and he was like, all right, I guess I'll take a math class. But without force, it was just something honest. Yeah, normally. It's
modeling.
Yeah.
And if, didn't Gandhi say, become what you want to see in the world? It's the same thing. It's modeling. If a child is watching happy, loving parents do stuff and they just want to do that, it's modeling. So if they'll just push against anything that's forced upon them.
They do.
That's the lesson, I think.
Which, again, goes back to trust.
Yeah.
And that is where the divine power, their own power comes in, and they get to make the choice. And I think that's a good place to end. Yay. So you guys, you can always go to my website, tracybrooker.com. Thank you for the patience with this webcast or podcast. And we'll be here next time. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Creative Outcomes podcast. And if you'd like to learn more, go to my website at tracybrooker.com.